All right, we're gonna get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome wherever you're coming from. My name is Sadukie, and today we're going to talk about exploring architectural katas. I want to give you a heads up that we do record these webinars and we do make them available afterwards. The recording will be available on Zoom for about 30 days, and then we move this to our webinars playlist on our YouTube channel. At the end of this webinar, if you're watching it and in the live webinar, you will get a thank you email probably before the end of today, if not first thing tomorrow morning, with all of the resources as well as the link to the recording. If you are watching this on YouTube or after the 30 days, if you want the email for all those supporting links, you need to sign up for the recording, and that link will also be in the description. All right. With all that said and done, let's get started talking about architectural katas. This is a concept that I have heard about, and I was excited when I first heard about it, and then got even more excited because I recognized a bunch of the things that was going on there. So let's see why I get so excited about these and what this can do. Uh-oh. Can you all hear me just fine? Okay.
Yeah, we are able to hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to talk about these architectural katas and what are they? So Ted Neward, he's someone who I've known over the years and I've seen the stuff he does, but he wondered, how are we supposed to be great architects if we're only doing this a few times, maybe half dozen times in our career? We should be able to practice our skills in order to become better software architects. And so you'll see his name here throughout the presentation because he was the one who put these together. So in today's presentation, we're going to have a bunch of slides, and then I want to do the start of an architectural kata with you all, and then we'll see what time allows for how far we can get down that line. So we'll talk about what is an architectural kata, talk about some of the formats that I've seen, some of the formats I've experienced, and then we'll introduce our kata. Heads up that our kata is not currently on their website. This is a kata that I had created based on some experiences that have come up over the years throughout my career and then recently while I was on vacation. All right, so what is an architectural kata? First, before we get into the architectural part, let's talk about what is a kata. So with the term kata, it is Japanese for form. And when you hear the term katas in our environment, we think about it from like a coding kata perhaps. So you've seen maybe those on how you can practice with code. Those were done where Dave Thomas was watching his children do karate and said, well, if karate has katas, we should be able to practice code. And Ted was like, well, if we can practice code, why not also practice software architecture skills? So with katas, there are ways for us to practice our form or practice our movements, or in our case, practice our architectural thinking and architectural understanding. So it's an interactive workshop uh, thinking about architectural thinking. And they're relatable scenarios that get you thinking. So the collection of scenarios, some will put you in situations where you know exactly what you're dealing with because maybe you've had that client, or maybe you've been a consumer. Um, there's one that's called Tales of the Fourth Grade that I did in January through Nate Shutta. And that one talks about an app for fourth grade parents, and I happened to be living that at the time because my younger son was in fourth grade. All right. So what else do you do in architectural uh, katas? So you can practice what you know now. You can also learn new things in the process. So what's nice about coming into an architectural kata is these could be run within your company. These could be run with larger companies with multiple dev teams and you mix up the teams. This could be done something online where you get all sorts of architects from all walks of life together, never met each other. You may have different ways of approaching architecture than somebody else. And so there's a lot of conversation happening and a lot of learning from each other. What's nice about these architecture katas too is it's a safe environment for you to try new ideas and know that if you fail, you're not causing a production failure. You're not causing issues. You're learning in that environment. And you might be learning by doing, or you might be learning by listening to others share their story who have already walked that path and can give you those tips. Okay, so who's involved with these architecture katas? There are two things to focus on. So the first one is you have a facilitator or a moderator. This is the person who's running the situation. If you're working today, it'll just be me. And it is just going to be, we're going to do one team. We're not going to do all the teams because time. But the facilitator or moderator, they're also the timekeeper. So paying attention to the time boxing of each of the steps along the way. They're also the one who will role play as the customer for the different katas that are out there. Your facilitator or moderator will have a software architectural background. In order to run a kata, you should understand what it takes to be an architect. But those who want to sharpen those skills are the people who also want to be there. And the guidance is to have teams of 3 to 5 people. Now, why 3 to 5? Because 3 to 5 is an odd number. You don't want to have where the team is causing discussions and issues, and then they're just like, oh, but we could do this or we can do that, and then your voting is stuck on a tie. That's why they go with an odd number. The other thing to note is that if you're dealing with like a company with multiple dev teams, one of the common strategies is to break up the existing dev teams and mix and match teams so that one, you have teams who haven't worked together might learn from each other, but then two, you don't have the inner complexities of team politics essentially. Now, when it comes to these architectural katas, I've seen a couple ways of doing it. So I was in a workshop in January at a conference. It was a 4-hour workshop, and we had people from all walks of life come in, and we were able to form groups that way. I've got some friends who run these outside of their workplaces, and what they do is they do them as competitions. So they pit teams against each other for the best architectural design, and so then they have judges who are also well known in the software architect world to help pick those winners of that competition. So you can make this a competitive thing if that's your thing. But I'm going to assure you that today's discussion is not going to be the competitive type. It's just so that you understand what are architecture katas, how do they work, what does it look like. Also, how can you be involved in architectural katas besides a moderator or facilitator or being a team? You can also contribute. So Ted Neward, who I quoted at the beginning of this, who is the one who started the whole architecture katas thing, has a GitHub repo. All the katas in there are in JSON form. You can submit your own katas, and he's open for PRs. Okay, so we know the what at a high level. We know the how. We know the who. Let's take a look at the process because there are multiple things. I'm going to stress that the key to figuring out the process for the architectural kata that you want to tackle is going to be understanding what time constraints you have. So right now it is almost 10 after 12. We started at about 12. So that would leave us, if we were to start right away, we would have 50 minutes and I would time box the phases accordingly. Some of these phases I'm going to show you, we can do. Some of these phases we won't do, but I want to show you that different people have different approaches because these architectural katas are what you make of them. So it's not necessarily, oh, Ted's way is the only way. No, there are other ways too. So I'll show you Ted's way. We'll talk about Mark Richards' way, and we'll then do our own. So first is Ted Neward's way. So his website is architecturalkatas.com. Again, he's the one who also has the GitHub repo of the architectural katas and is open to PRs. So for phase 0, this is the team preparation. Now, when you look into architectural katas and how they're done, a lot of people will do them in person. But we can also do them digitally. If I'm doing it digitally, then I will probably have something like a Miro board to start. And that way I can lay out the kata so that people can go directly to the kata's information. And then they can break off to various sections of the Miro board digitally. Today, we're just going to deal with it as a conversation. but stay tuned for, I'll have a blog post on how we can do this with Miro as well. But we get our teams about 3 to 5 people, usually about 4 to 5 teams is about as big as they recommend. Keeping in mind that the moderator is going to need to know all the different katas and be able to act as the customer on each of those. Then the next phase is going to be the discussion phase. In the discussion phase, they review the problem or the problem description or whatever you want to call the text that explains the situation, the scenario. Ask questions. This is something that we can't stress enough when we deal with these. You're allowed to ask questions of the customer or the product owner or whatever you want to call your moderator or facilitator. They're the ones who will have the arbitrary answers. I say arbitrary because the answers are going to depend on the questions that you're asked. When it comes to the discussion phase, something to note with any of these katas is that there is no prescribed technology. Any technology is fair game. So if you happen to work in a team with Java folks and you want to stay with a Java stack and make recommendations along that, that's fine. If you have a technology agnostic team and you're comfortable making recommendations from just the architectural and not dealing with the technical, but having to make those technical decisions later, that's fine as well. You can make assumptions on technologies you aren't familiar with, but be clear on those assumptions. And I can't stress this enough when it comes to the discussion phase. If you can have somebody take notes to make it easier for carrying things over, that helps. The other thing we have to stress too is you need to say that you're working with a dev team similar to what you probably work with in your day-to-day, which means if you have devs on your team that you're struggling with, you can't just arbitrarily hire new devs and fire other devs. You're working with that kind of team in mind. Now, you could make up your own team, but understand that we don't have teams of exceeding expertise all the time. We have varying levels. So you may have your junior devs, you may have your middle devs, you may have your devs who've been dealing with COBOL code all their life and haven't seen newer technologies as well. Okay, so after you've looked at the problem, you've identified some of the stuff, then Ted Neward mentions talking about like a peer review phase where you're gonna talk about your discussion and your understandings and your ideas, and you'll present that to the group. When you present to the group, the other teams can then ask you questions about the choices you made. And then there's a voting phase afterwards. So this is if you are like, oh, this is a good solution or a bad solution or just a meh solution. So the voting phase for when you're running an architecture kata following Ted's phases is everybody on the other teams can say, is this a good solution, a bad solution, or a meh, it's meh solution. So that's what those are. Now that's Ted's approach. I'm going to talk about Nate's approach as well. So Nate talks about thinking architecturally, and he did a workshop at CodeMash earlier this year. Again, you end up picking a team, you gather your supplies, and you select your kata. Now the kata site that he used was the Fundamentals of Software Architecture's website. So Fundamentals of Software Architecture is a book written by Mark Richards and Neil Ford. And then they have a link to Architecture Katas, and they talk about Ted Neward's katas. So we ended up using their katas for the workshop. And then you tell it, you can either select from the list of the katas or you can have it generate a random kata. For our group, we chose a random kata and ended up with Tales of a Fourth Grade, which was funny because there were a couple of us who were parents of fourth graders at the time. After you have a team, after you have a kata, now you want to get with your group and discuss what kind of architectural decisions can we make? What kind of architectural recommendations can we make? Again, ask those questions. Any technology is fair game, and you can make assumptions, but you have to make sure you document those assumptions so that you can present those. The next thing Nate had us do after that was identifying the quality attributes. Quality attributes, or sometimes you'll see them as architecture characteristics. Sometimes you'll see them as just ilities, but not all of them end in ilities, such as security or efficiency. So identify the attributes that you would want to see in the software architecture. Once you identify those, then you need to prioritize those. What's important for the business in this decision? Is this something where we have to put security ahead? Do we need availability, reliability, some kind of other ility? Those are the things you need to think through. Then the next thing we talk about was fitness functions. So what could we do as architects to put in our systems to ensure that the recommendations we're making are being followed? What can we use, such as maybe Arch Unit, or there's a .NET version of that as well, where we can make sure that projects aren't referencing projects that they shouldn't be referencing? Like, how do we ensure that our guidance is being measured? This is where fitness functions come into play. So Nate had us think about the various fitness functions that we could use for our systems. Then we could document our decision. For this workshop, it was toward the end, and I think we had probably about 20 minutes left. And as soon as he mentioned documentation, about most of the room cleared out. I think there were only about half dozen of us left. Don't do that. Documentation is important, and I can't stress this enough. You need to document your decisions today for tomorrow you. Forget about documenting these decisions for other architects or for developers to understand. Are you going to remember tomorrow the decisions you made today with the context you have today? So I'm going to tell you, document selfishly, though you should also document for the other folks as well. But if you're one of those who's like, I don't like documentation, just remember, future you relies on what your understanding is today. And there's no mind reading going back and forth. So you need to capture that context when you have it. All right. And then the last phases I'm going to show you is the phases of the kata from Mark Richards. So Mark Richards is one of the co-authors of Fundamentals of Architecture. And he actually is doing a series on software architecture stuff. But what's nice with this, so this is a 2-hour to 2.5-hour workshop, and we'll get all the phases. There we go. So there's a whole, you'll notice the pattern is team formation, problem discussion, and then it's talking about the architecture and the choices you're going to make. His gets a little more granular into creating components and selecting styles and diagramming architectures. But then in the end, it's present the solution. And in his, you have about 2.5 hours almost to go through most of those phases. With presenting the solution, each team has 5 minutes to present their solution. So you have to go from, I'm going to build this huge system to, okay, now I need to present it in a very short period of time. So that's what the story is with architectural katas and phases. What we're going to do before we get into that is I want to show you the architectural kata site so we can take a look at it. Any questions so far?
Not yet.
Okay. I'm going to bring this one over. I'm going to grab the URL and I'm going to put this in chat. And then I'll share the screen again. Okay. So these are the architectural katas that are out there so far. I want to take you through these so you can see how they work. So this is the fundamentals of software architecture. TEDS has it's the same list as TEDS, only presented a little neater, not in JSON format, but in a readable format. But they have a title, they have a general description, and they have who are the users, usually with the hand wavy numbers of dozens, thousands, millions, few. So the vagueness that we get is software architects. Okay, how many users am I working with? Then there's the requirements. So what has to happen with the system, what must be in the system, and then any additional context. And you'll see the various situations. So there's like a CMS system, there's a conference organizing system, that's all stuff, no cruff. Like I said, Tales of a Fourth Grade was dealing with fourth grade parents and systems for their students. And then there's the MI6, so nursing. There's all sorts of different environments. There's student stuff, there's concert tickets, things like that. What I want to show you for ours now, so you've got the link for the various katas that are out there. The one we want to go through today is a new one. And why do we want to do a new one? Well, because in Ted's repo, one of the things he suggests is go through a kata, lead a kata, and contribute a kata. So the kata I want to show you is our super time box kata approach. And we are at 12:20. So our goal is to give you a quick understanding of the architectural katas. For this situation, for this discussion to happen and to be engaging, you can come off mute during our talk, or if you're not comfortable coming off mute, you can post in chat as well. Anything that gets posted in chat, rest assured, I will be able to repeat too. So we're going to do a quick understanding of architectural katas. I'm going to introduce the kata. We'll allow for questions, ask away. Then we're going to want to talk about the architectural characteristics or the ilities and take that from there. Now, allowing for time. We don't have enough time to diagram a solution. We can probably talk about a possible solution, but watching our time, maybe you have ideas for something that you aren't comfortable sharing during the session. Blog about it, share it on social media, and then tag us. I've got links for that here. But first, let's introduce the kata. So I'm going to call this kata manufacturing for the finish line. This is based off of a story that I heard while I was out on vacation recently, and also my experience working in manufacturing. So we were at an event where they had these race cars, and there was a video about how the race cars are manufactured. And one of the manufacturers specifically has a clause with their suppliers that if the production line goes down and they don't have enough supply from the suppliers, or if they get shoddy parts from the suppliers, that supplier can be fined an exorbitant amount per minute that the system is down. And I heard that, I was like, oof, that's kind of scary. So for our kata, we have a company that specializes in manufacturing pieces for a very popular vehicle. This company needs a system that can ensure that everything runs smoothly. Now, that's the short introduction. Who are our users of this system that we need to create? So we're talking about things in manufacturing, so machinists, people who are creating the parts. We have shipping agents, people who will ship the parts or deliver the parts somehow. Shipping agents are also responsible then for materials. There's quality control, people who are ensuring that things are meeting the standards. There's a facilities planner, a plant manager, and engineers who also need to use this system. All right. For the requirements of the system, it needs to keep track of the inventory for both the materials and the parts. So the materials to make these parts are getting sent in. We need to make sure we have everything there. We can't afford to cause an issue for a vehicle manufacturer company, client. So keep track of the inventory, also a notification system for the various thresholds of inventory. So as my inventory parts are getting to a low threshold, I need to get the notice of, hey, we need more supply here. We need a routing system to know where the parts are in that manufacturing process. For those not familiar with manufacturing, the routing system will tell which part is at what station, and they do a lot of scanning for that typically. Tracking the materials needed for each part. It needs to be able to track the time at each station for each part, because again, we have a client who's very sensitive on time and we suffer for that. We need to identify and track defects in the process and suggest potential methods to improve quality or avoid in the future. We need to improve our material qualities as well. So if we notice that our material quality is causing the issues down the line, then we want to make some recommendations on that. And the system also needs to be able to generate costing reports and suggest where costing issues may exist. And we have one more slide, and I can come back and forth to these slides, so just let me know if you need me to go back to the inventory, or if you need me to go back to, or not inventory, the requirements or the additional context. The additional context, so none of the off-the-shelf ERP systems meet their needs. So we have to do a custom system. The vehicle maker client that the company has an agreement that if that production line is shut down, again, they're fined at exorbitant fees per minute down. The manufacturing facilities, by the way, are located down the street from the vehicle manufacturer. This is a requirement for the vehicle manufacturer to ensure that the production lines continue to run smoothly. However, I need to also point out that this particular manufacturer company also has multiple facilities on the campus, as they also make parts for other clients as well. They can't put all of their eggs in one basket and rely on just their vehicle manufacturer client. All right, with all of those things said, the question that we go is, what architecture characteristics or what ilities or what quality attributes should we consider?
What would be an example of an architecture characteristic?
So architecture characteristics are things like availability, reliability, efficiency, security. So these are things that we're looking for in terms of the quality of the overall architecture system. So what's going to be important? Availability is usually one that we see when you have something that needs to be on all the time, always on demand.
I would say availability be one, and security regarding authorization. What roles do the different users have, and what they have access to.
Mm-hmm. There's reliability. Gotcha, Siba.
Availability does come along with redundancy, right? Do we count that as well?
Which one?
I was wondering if redundancy
Yeah.
is inherent to reliability or availability, or if that should be a separate one.
So redundancy would go hand in hand with like availability, because redundancy could be a solution for availability.
Yeah.
That's actually why I choose the term architecture characteristics, is because they're not always ilities. Clearly, security is not one that ends in ility. Redundancy doesn't end in it. Efficiency. So that's why I use the term architecture characteristics. Let's see what other. With regards to architectural characteristics, I'm going to put the link here. Chat. And this is where we get into things like scalability and modularity, performance and efficiency, fault tolerance, things like that. If it helps, would you like me to go back to any of the slides? The requirements, the users, the additional context?
Sure.
Do you want me to start? Do you want me to go back further to users? Do you want the company statement? What do you want to see?
Start here at requirements, maybe.
Yep. We'll take the next 10 minutes or so to look at the potential abilities that we want to look at, and then we want to prioritize those.
I am unsure of other characteristics to list off.
Let's talk through it.
I mean, I think maybe in general,
Mm-hmm.
it should be, I'm just going off of your blog that you sent us, flexible and extensible.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like one of the requirements is that we are to make recommendate, or the system is to make recommendations of better quality material suppliers. So I guess we should be able to handle multiple different material suppliers.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Bhavash.
I'd say it's performance, particularly on the aspect of being fined for per minute. So yeah, I think performance is a key factor of the system.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't want them being fined for exorbitant costs per minute.
So, so the kind of confusing part for me, okay, like I have worked in manufacturing industry for a while, since I moved away from it few years back. But this seems like a requirement for multiple systems because I have seen like we used to have inventory systems, we had different shipping systems, we had jobs and basically manufacturing system where all jobs and processes were managed, including parts and dies and everything whatever. So each of those seems to a different system and each had their own kind of requirements.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm thinking putting a single system for entire thing. It's kind of difficult, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that. I've worked in a couple more manufacturing environments as well, where some of those
Mm,
systems are truly separated, and then
correct.
some will use an off-the-shelf ERP system, and then kind of customize it after that. The
Correct.
most recent one I worked on was where they took an off-the-shelf ERP system, which had all these different modules for QA and for accounting and for costing, and then they continued to customize on top of that, and then they needed to move to a new system, and it was painful.
Yeah. Yeah, we have done similar. We have taken off the shelf products, but then we have tied with the companies to customize those to
Mm-hmm.
the needs. So of course, this used to be a big company. Now it's gone private. It was one of the Fortune 500s, but then it became private.
Yep.
But yeah, they had that option. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's why on the additional context, the first point I put in there is that none of the off-the-shelf ERP systems would work for what they need. This has to be a custom system. So that was intentional because it's one of those that we've seen those where they do the ERP systems that morph into unmaintainable systems. We've seen that, we've lived it. So we want to try to avoid that if we can.
Does that have a characteristic name? Like if an off-the-shelf system does not work for the customer, is there a characteristic that fits into?
So that could be, it depends on who you talk with. Some people use the term customizability. Some will use extensibility.
Okay.
So customizing, like how much customization can you have within the application? That's a thing. The other thing though is extensible. So how much with like an ERP system, an enterprise resource planning system, you could have it where it already comes out and it has things to track your customers and to track your suppliers and to track your parts and where they are throughout each of the steps in manufacturing. And then maybe you need to add something to the reports. So now there's an extensibility where can you add a custom field and how easy is that to make that happen?
Got it.
Maintainability.
What maintainability?
Do we need to consider scalable?
Whether it's scalable?
Yeah.
Yeah, scalability is a thing as well.
I would also put accountability. I don't know if we have talked about it. Who is responsible for what? That always comes into picture, especially if there are fines. So
So with that accountability too, that helps with tracking where is that part at this at each station, who is working on that part.
Fault tolerance.
Fault tolerance, yeah. Fault tolerance, the other term you might hear is resiliency. How resilient is it?
Yeah.
I guess with the ones that we have so far, which would we want to prioritize in our design? Because, I mean, when it comes to architecting a solution in general, we have all of these abilities in mind, but our clients will definitely want us to put some priority on things. When it comes to this particular client, we have to remember that they have that vehicle maker client that we have to be aware of. So are there particular abilities that we might want to put at a higher weight than others?
Let's say either reliability or availability or both of them.
Why do you say that?
Because this system is pretty important to them, and they want to be able to track their downtime, if any.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I've got.
So it was availability, reliability.
I'd say the performance one again, for the same reasons, to avoid the fines.
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
I'd say the performance is important one to avoid the fines again.
Okay.
The extensibility, because they are manufacturing for multiple other manufacturers, other clients as well.
Okay. That's a slippery slope sometimes, that extensibility and meeting clients' needs. At what point do we want to make sure that it's extensible enough, and at what point is it too extensible?
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
If you give a if you give a finger, right, they take the hand. I have seen that happen. Like every customer then wants it customized. Like
Oh,
we want things to be done this way, that way. So you have to put a boundary there.
yeah. So you need to be careful of that.
Especially in a system which is so tightly coupled, or it is running so tightly. Like if you want customized thing, then it can't be in timely manner. It will take different times.
Mm-hmm. I've seen those systems. Right? Are there some architectural recommendations that we want to try to make based off of what we know?
I'm new to this, so I don't know what options are available for a recommendation.
So when it comes to making recommendations, it's one of those that bring your experience to the table. What is it that you're like, oh, you know what? I know we could do this with this technology, or I know we could do this with this very specific technology. Or I think there's a technology that could do this. Does anybody else know about that?
Like, would that um, include whether it's a website or not, or a mobile app, or like what?
Yeah, I
That,
mean, you
or is
you
it
can make
architecture more
recommendations.
abstract than that?
Yeah, you can make recommendations for things like that as well.
So mainly technology versus platform.
Yeah.
Maybe an event-driven architecture or something equivalent for the high
Event-driven,
throughput might be applicable here.
yeah, event-driven architecture. What makes you think to go down the event-driven architecture? Is there any key giveaways?
I thought there was, but I can't pick them out. I just saw that there was a high throughput on the system, but I can't seem to find it.
Gotcha.
Modular.
Yeah, modular approach. Any recommendations, like what they should watch out for, like how they group their modules? Any guidance that we can give them?
Yeah, at high level like inventory. The inventory of materials is one module and the manufactured products is other module.
Right, that makes sense.
having
So Matt, if it
a
helps,
separate tracking system as well,
yeah, tracking system.
module.
Okay, suggest a module.
Reporting system.
That
Would you be requiring reporting system as well?
if there's a supporting system,
Not supporting, reporting.
reporting system, yes. The reporting
You
system.
need observability. So
That's when we do these things, we need to think about like all the systems that we have to encompass. And sometimes it helps to take that high level approach of, okay, I need a reporting system before you have to go, okay, can we recommend a particular reporting system? Like, do we recommend Power BI? Do we recommend Crystal Reports? Do we recommend reporting systems that work with a particular database platform? Do we even need a database platform? Things like that.
Would thinking of the notification system separately from everything else be valid here?
So a notification system is an interesting one. Would that be, I guess, let's talk about it further. What all would we need it for? I mean, we've got the inventory thresholds are there.
I don't know if they also want to be notified of a part that's been at a station too long.
Yeah.
They, I guess, have to be able to set those thresholds per part and per station.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Maybe if defects are being identified.
yeah, or
Yeah.
or if they need to be notified of different quality, which would go along with defects, maybe, but
We have quality
qualities in the
thresholds.
material, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as software architects, these are the things we have to think about. And this is why we have architecture katas. This particular one takes a manufacturing theme. There's some with a education theme. There's some with other themes as well. So it gets you challenging your mind. Like, okay, if I were to design this to meet these particular needs, what would I do? You can do these architectural katas by yourself if you really wanted to try to test your limits. The trouble with doing it by yourself, though, is you don't have somebody there who acts as the customer, so you have to make a lot of assumptions on your own. But again, goes back to what do I say whenever there's assumptions, document those. Document them with the context that you have of, okay, I'm going to assume this is what I need.
In general, are these katas done how we're doing them here, or is there like a wizard on a website that one goes through? Like, I assume there's no right answer, but are there some answers that are better than others that you'd be notified about, that kind of thing?
Correct. So there's no answer key to the architectural katas. And so that's why I caution about going it alone. Go with somebody who can act as the customer, who also has an architecture background. Typically, you'll bring somebody into the company who's got an architectural background who can facilitate for those who will then spend a little bit longer of a time on things such as talking more about the architectural qualities. So what are those? And setting the stage with those. They would set the stage with what are fitness tests if you want to go into the route of how do we ensure that our architectural recommendations are being followed properly. Things like that. So how these are typically delivered, the ones I've seen most common are done in person. And they're usually done over about a 4-hour process. That seems to be the sweet spot.
yeah, usually I have seen like along with the architecture experts, you call the domain experts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then you will have a 1 week session of 5 hours each day. They'll walk you through everything, how things are happening, where what will happen, which modules will be responsible for what, and they'll walk you through the complete UIs and everything. If you are taking off the shelf, if you are building, then they'll walk you through how the system should be there. So it will be an entire week or even 2 week long in-person system or meetings.
Yeah, when you're lucky that you can get the domain experts there, take advantage of that because it's hard sometimes. Usually your domain experts are those who are stuck in meetings all day. So it's like, I just need about 10 minutes, half hour on the calendar, or better yet, give us as much time as you can and take it from there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But see, it's like we are looking it from the outside. When you
Mm-hmm.
actually start building it, right, there are so many small things which come up. Like, okay, you did all of this. What about packaging systems? How are
Mm-hmm.
you going to push stuff through? Who is monitoring the jobs? Who is responsible for getting in stuff into the actual inventory system? Like entire thing, it breaks down. So you require those kind of people to know. Okay, you will require this as well, this as well, this as well.
Yep.
You might not think, but you'll require this as well. So even waste management, like there's so much waste happening in manufacturing flows,
Yep.
so you require a lot of things there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of those where you want to get into the domain as much as you can. You want to understand the business problems. The technical, we can do the technical and say, oh, we're going to use SignalR, we're going to use and Service Bus, we're going to use all these different technologies. We can make those, but it's crucial, as you were pointing out, that when you can talk with the domain experts, you learn the little gotchas that you as a developer probably wouldn't have thought about unless you've spent time in the domain. That was something that I liked about with the manufacturing system, is that I was able to go on the shop floor and I could see the machinists actually working on the various different parts. And I could go into our production planner's office and talk with them about what kind of characteristics are they looking for in terms of quality, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of times at stations, and then creating the reports. Now, for our system, it was an off-the-shelf ERP system, so we were tied to the reporting system that it used. But at least we were able to do some customization and track all these kinds of things.
And that is very important. We used to go to the plants, we used to fly to the plants every, I would say, month or 2 months, different plants, and see how things are going. Like, because if you don't go on the plant or on the shop floor, you will never understand how the system is being used. You have designed it in certain way and it is being used in completely different way. I have seen that happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well, and
that
especially
is
with
important.
as developers, we have the idea, and as architects, we have the idea of, oh, I want my system to be used in this ideal space, but then we forget about things like, oh, they're on the shop floor and there's all this different noise that's happening. Or, oh, I need the receptionist to check in somebody for a meeting with one of the other people. And she's also dealing with multiple phone calls. And it's like, oh no, how do they handle all of this all at once? So understanding the user experience, that's a whole another webinar that I do, because it's important to understand how that factors into your architectural decisions as well. If you understand the user experience, you can architect the
Yeah.
system in a way that's a little more well received.
Uh, More received than I would say assisting,
Mm-hmm.
because I have seen people doing work even when the system goes down.
Yeah.
So they are trained to do everything. Even if our complete system goes down, they will still push out the product, and they
Yep.
will still talk with the shippers. They'll still talk, they'll write it down, and they'll still get things done. Our system is there only to assist them, to
Yep.
get things easier for them. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting, this thing.
Yep. All right. So we look at the characteristics. We look at how do we prioritize them. We have some ideas on what we can make for recommendations. At this point, what do you use? Like, if you were to make these recommendations, let's say this was an actual client of yours, how would you make these recommendations? Are there diagrams that you could include? Are there particular documents that you would create, what does that look like for you? I know for me, I would be using something like Excalidraw and drawing out the systems themselves from a high level, or I might use mermaid diagrams and C4 design to draw out the systems first at a very high level before I make any deep recommendations. But what do others do?
I've recently, our company has required using C4 diagrams to show what we're planning on doing. So I would probably go with that just because that's what I'm most familiar with to start with.
Mm-hmm. Are you using any particular tools to create your C4 diagrams?
Visio is what I've used most recently,
Okay.
but I think there's an extension in Visual Studio Code that I tried out too. So
Yep.
Yeah, I'd go with C4 as well. I've used it a small amount, well, maybe a medium amount, but I've used Structurizer to generate the diagrams. Also use Plant UML, which is an online. Just it uses multiple languages, sorry, notations, but
Mm-hmm.
it can do C4 diagrams as well. So I've used those.
I'm gonna put links to these in the thank you email as well, so that you're all like, oh, what's Structurizer? What's C4? It's Mermaid. For these tools like Excalidraw. Because that helps for creating the diagrams. Because the next thing I was going to suggest, because of where we are on time, is if you want to take it one step further, draw these systems out and then blog about it. And let's tell others about architecture katas that are out there. If you want to share your stuff with us on social media, like, hey, I blogged about this, we'll gladly reshare it. We're NimblePros on Twitter, nimblepros.com on Blue Sky, /company/NimblePros on LinkedIn. I'm the one behind those accounts, so I will gladly be like, oh, yeah, we talked about this in the software architecture kata. Let's share it and let's get others knowing about it too. And next month, I'll be doing another webinar on unveiling the proxies and the proxy pattern. So that's where that topic is going. And we also have a couple more coming up for vertical slices, clean architecture, and modular monoliths in July. And in August, we're going to get into .NET Aspire with some open telemetry and Grafana. And then if you have any questions, feel free to either email me at the, just reply to that thank you email that goes directly to me. If you got the link for the Zoom for here for today, email me at that email address. That's all that comes to me. That's my first name last name at nimblepros.com. But yeah, ask questions. I will do what I can to get you your links and such and resources as needed. Rest assured, like I said, at the end of this, probably later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning, you'll get a thank you email with the link to the recording, plus all the supporting links. All right, any other questions?
I think I'm good.
That's good. This was a really good exercise.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming and participating. Because your participation is more enjoyable. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Here, have a great one.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.